Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to call the February 7th City Council meeting to order. Due to the Governor's Proclamation 20-28 relating to the COVID-19 emergency and open public meetings, this meeting is being held remotely. At this point, we'll take a moment. We'll do a roll call of our council members in attendance. Please say here when I call your name. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Here.
Thanks. Councilmember Joe.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Here.
Great. Councilmember Ray.
Here.
Thank you. And Council President Walsh. Here. We have all 7 council members in attendance this evening. For the next item on our agenda, I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, but could you please mute yourself before we start? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda this evening is special business, and this is a brand new item. This is something we're trying out at the suggestion of our interim police chief, Paula Schwan. I think it's a fabulous idea. This is ID 1035. It is the introduction of police department promotions. I'm really excited tonight to be able to do this on camera and to congratulate and introduce the 2 candidates who have been promoted. Very excited that Mike, and I haven't seen if Nate has joined us yet, but I'll look around my comments and see. Hope we have both. So Interim Chief Schwan, if you want to introduce this item and talk about the promotions and introduce the successful candidates, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, council members, Madam Mayor, and all those in attendance. On January 5th, the police department hosted a promotional testing, and thankfully, all 6 of those that participated passed that test. And tonight we are going to be recognizing for Corporal Nathan Lane and Mike Lucht. And at this time, I'd like to have Nathan Lane give a few words and background about himself, how long he's been with the department, maybe his favorite hobby, and what he thinks maybe he wants to do in the future here with Issaquah.
Thank you, Chief Paula. I'm Nate Lane. I've been with Issaquah Police Department for about 21 years now. For the police department, I act as a active shooter instructor, a patrol tactics instructor, and currently an FTO for the FTO program. Some hobbies, I guess, would be just trying to be as healthy as I can be as I get older. And with this position, I would like to continue to be an effective leader, just like we have here at the Issaquah Police Department. Chief Schwan has created a nice platform for rebuilding, and as a corporal, I want to be a pillar for that building process and give these new officers that are coming in as much knowledge and experience as I can pass on. So once I retire, this Issaquah Police Department will be a better place.
Thank you, Corporal Lane. Now, to introduce Mike Lucht, could you also give a little bit about yourself, your background and hobby, maybe, and your future for Issaquah PD?
Yeah, Mike Lucht, I've been with the Issaquah Police Department for 7 years now. Worked for 5 years in North Dakota before coming here. 3 years of that was working like plainclothes narcotics. So a lot of background in investigation. I worked 2020, I think it was, in detectives here. So excited to be promoted. Guess my hobbies, anything outside, coming from the Midwest. I like being outdoors, hiking, camping, kind of anything like that, family related. What I want to bring to the department, I think what I would say, number one, is I want to set a good example for the other people around me, like work ethic wise. We have a big job to do here. So I hope I set an example for everyone around me just to follow. That's what I'm shooting for the most.
Thank you, Mike. So biggest thing is I would like to thank you all for your work to date, and I look forward to what's ahead for each of you. And now I'd like to open up if the council members or the mayor or anybody would like to ask any questions of the two corporals.
That is great. Thank you, Chief Swan. I'll keep my eye on the chat. I just want to start off by congratulating Mike and Nate. Thank you for going through the promotion process. So glad to see you. I wish we were in person. I think we're only a month or so away from that, but it's really nice for the community and for the council to be able to meet you via camera and hear from you. So thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. It's Chris Ray. Nate and Mike, just want to say congratulations and well deserved. And we appreciate all of your years of service and everything that you have brought to the community over the years. And we're expecting great things from you and helping us to build that next generation of Issaquah police officers. So thanks for all your service. Congratulations on your promotion and good luck in your future endeavor.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Going to move over to Councilmember Mertz.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Also want to wish Nate and Mike congratulations. As a Midwestern guy, nice to see a North Dakota guy moving up out here. I know we don't have the real seasons out here quite like back home, but it's still pretty cool. I did have a question for the chief. Are these two new corporal positions? I believe we authorized two new corporal positions, right? One for another, I think for another squad, and then a sixth. I think we authorized the fifth and a sixth corporal position last year. Did we not? Are these the fifth and the sixth, or is there any backfill with these two positions?
There will be two more positions later on in the year. We only have, we're waiting till we build up our staff a little bit more before we process any more of the applicants. There are two more that tested. Two of the six will be promoted, hopefully, to sergeant later on in the year that we would present to you and let you know of that. And then two more on the list that passed are in the running and the possibility of being promoted later in the year. We just don't have the staffing right now for that other division to have started quite yet. We're building and working on that, but that will be in the process. And so we are doing it little by little. And these two are the first to help fill our squads that are actually on the street on a regular basis. And then the specialty ones will be filled as staffing allows moving forward.
Got it. Thank you. And it's also great to see the training focus that they're both going to have and helping. I know with the newer officers that are coming in from coming into law enforcement and coming in from outside the IPD. It's great to see that emphasis bearing fruit with the IPD. So thank you, and thanks to the new corporals.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councilmember
Councilmember
Mertz. And Councilmember Mertz's reference was to, I think, something that Nate had said, which is his job includes FTO, which is Field Training Officer. And that's really important to have on our force. Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Thursday, I had an opportunity to do a ride along with the department. Thank you, Chief Swan, for letting me have that opportunity. I understand we have two laterals, one from Auburn and one from Seattle. That will help fill out our force. But I certainly heard in my ride along that the officers such as Mike and Nate have been doing a great job with very thin margins for staff, and it's hard to staff everyone in the city, all the officers that we need out there. But the officers that I rode with are doing a great job, and I've known Nate Lane for a while, as well as he's been in the community for quite some time. And I just want to say that the police are doing a great job out there under very trying circumstances. And Chief, it's a credit to you and the corporals and the sergeants that are out there on the street. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Joe. We have another lateral that's also going to be starting on the 15th or 16th of February. So we're excited, and an entry level on the 16th as well. So two more spots. And one of our candidates graduates tomorrow from the academy. So he'll be on FTO starting on Wednesday.
Fabulous update. Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Councilmember Joe. It's really important part of our training as council members and mayors to go and do things like the ride-along. So thank you for getting that done. That's awesome. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Congratulations to Nate and Mike. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Interim Chief Schwan visited our Kiwanis group a week or so ago, and we asked her questions for almost an hour, and we got wonderful answers. And I just appreciate so much that openness and willingness to meet with the community and let us know what's going on. And there was a lot of appreciation expressed for the Issaquah Police Department and the work that they do in our community. So want to extend that to all of you, and thank you so much for all that you do.
Councilmember DiMichele, thank you. That's great. Chief Schwan, I just want to thank you for this new idea of introducing our community to new officers joining, as well as those that are in promotion. So thank you for doing that tonight. It's a great addition to the way we do our work. And congratulations.
Thank you for having us, Mayor.
For sure. Thank you all. Looking at the next item this evening, we will be moving on to audience comments. And for those of you who submitted the online form to make comments, your name will be called shortly. For those of you who have joined us tonight and would like to make comments but did not sign up in advance, can you please raise your virtual hand? You may be able to do this if you're on the phone by pressing *3. And if you've joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. This varies by device. One option may be to go to the participant panel and choose the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner. City Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for general audience comments this evening or indicated a desire to speak?
Mayor, no one has signed up in advance to make comments, and let me just monitor the attendee list really quickly to see if anyone would like to raise their virtual hand or send me, the host, a chat message. Monitoring the list here. I'm not seeing that anyone wishes to make comments at this time.
Thank you very much. So just as a reminder, written comments can be submitted at any time on any issue to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. I'm going to hand it over to Council President Walsh and see if there were any email comments she would like to summarize that may have been received on tonight's agenda topics.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There were no comments received specifically on tonight's agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now move on to committee and regional reports, and we'll start first with Councilmember Joe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As an alternate for the Cascade Water Alliance, I attended the meeting on January 26th. They approved some funding for this next year. Salmon Days will be getting $3,500 as part of the sponsorship program. So look for that support when we put Salmon Days together this year. Cross your fingers, knock on wood. We also heard a discussion about a water sales policy. The City of Sumner and DOE have both approached Cascade Water Alliance on purchasing some water from the excess that we have, and the discussion was quite robust. The great thing about it, or the thing that I thought was notable, is that the cost for the water that we're offering to these two entities also includes the fixed costs or the sunk costs that all the members have put into the alliance over the years, such that they're paying an equal amount that a city of Issaquah would need to pay should we want to increase our allocation as well. It's an incentive for those entities to come in and possibly join the group, but it's also fair pricing for all the members. So that was reviewed by the board, and we'll be going to those two entities with the price that we have in mind, and we'll see what steps they want to take. If the consent agenda is approved tonight, I will be approved as the alternate for the Cascade Water Alliance, and I plan to serve on the Finance Committee this next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joe. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. So on January 19th, I attended the Regional Transit Committee and we approved a committee annual work plan and orientation. And related to membership on the RTC, each member is meeting this month to have one-on-one conversations with Metro General Manager Terry White, and my appointment with him is next week. On February 3rd, I attended a meeting of the Eastside Human Services Forum. The board elected 3 new members, increasing the number on the board to 10, and received reports from the Finance and Governance Committee. Under EHSF's new governance model, the group will hold brief monthly meetings with the majority of business being conducted by committees. Also on February 3rd, I attended the Healthier Here Governing Board. The board voted to invest $20 million in 4 major areas. First is the Medicaid transformation. Second is community-based organizations. Third is tribal organizations. And fourth is workforce capacity and development. The last item was added in response to the current workforce crisis occurring in physical and behavioral health programs. And it amounts to a quarter of the $20 million that was allocated. In addition, Healthier Here is partnering with 5 local tribes and will invest an additional $110,000 in assessing how successfully traditional medicine practices are being integrated into health organizations serving primarily Native American populations. Today, I asked the city administrator to distribute what is in effect an annual plan from Healthier Here, and I distribute that to the council, and anyone else who's interested in seeing that, I'd be glad to share it with them as well. And then finally, the Connect to Community Advisory Group will meet this next Tuesday, and the Regional Transit Committee will meet next Wednesday, February the 16th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Hunt. I have 3 reports this evening. The King Conservation District Advisory Committee will meet tomorrow, February 8th, and the agenda has been posted. Of note, we will discuss our work plan for 2022 and the identified priorities from King Conservation District for this committee are equity and diversity, member jurisdiction grants, strategic plan, elections, and the 2025 ILA and rate renewal. I spoke with Sustainability Manager Stacey Van McKinstry, who is the staff support for me on this committee. And one thing that we would like to propose adding is wildfire preparation as a topic for discussion. This is something that King Conservation District does. They work with landowners on wildfire preparation. And as this is a growing concern in our community, we would like to better understand what they're doing and how we could benefit from their services in that area. So I will report back after that meeting. I attended the Regional Water Quality Committee meeting on February 2nd. This was my first committee meeting on this committee, and we discussed our work plan for 2022. Of note, the first meeting or meetings will be an orientation for the new committee members because there are several of us that are new to the committee. This is a committee that works on policies and plans related to water quality. It's very technical, so the orientation will be very useful, and I will look forward to reporting back after that. One of the issues that will be in our immediate future is looking into nutrient issues in wastewater. And then lastly, on January 20th, the Salmon Recovery Council of WIRA 8 met, and WIRA 8 is the technical name for our watershed. We approved a letter of legislative priorities that was sent to our state legislature. And we also heard from me and some other members of the WIRA 8 Salmon Recovery Council about a collaborative effort to develop a budget proviso this session for doing some research and taking action to reduce light pollution on Lake Sammamish. Light pollution on Lake Sammamish is known to affect survival of early life stage salmon. So this was at the request of Representative Ramos, and we did discuss this at this WIRA 8 Salmon Recovery Council meeting. And so we will find out if there is a budgeted amount for this work shortly. So look forward to keeping you all in the loop on that. And then we also had informational updates from Mountains to Sound Greenway on their National Heritage Area Management Plan and on the Lake Sammamish kokanee recovery. This last year, we did see a relatively strong kokanee return, so that is really good news because they're a critically endangered population. The next meeting of the Salmon Recovery Council will be on March 17th. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Chris Ray. The Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors will meet this Thursday, February 10th at 4 o'clock in a virtual meeting. There are 4 items of regular business, kind of timely given Councilmember Hunt's report, but the first is around wildfire prevention program. There's a proposal to fund full-time wildfire mitigation and emergency preparedness specialist supported by a full-time administrative professional. The 2 new positions, along with the existing emergency manager, will provide emergency management coverage during times of disaster. There are 3 funding options that are being considered. One is a separate contract for the 3 wildfire prevention positions using the existing funding formula. The second is to add to the operating budget utilizing the existing funding formula. And the third is to contract separately with Sammamish for emergency management. And the 2 wildfire prevention positions would be added to the Eastside Fire and Rescue operating budget. Options 1 and 2 would have about the same estimated financial impact to Issaquah of about $135,000. Option 3 would cost about $79,000 annually. In the current year, all 3 of the options can be funded with existing fund balance, will not have any budget impact this year. If there's an interest in talking more about this, we can take it up at good of the order. So please let us know if you'd like to talk further about it at that time. Also on the agenda is this strategic plan introduction. Every 3 to 5 years, Eastside Fire and Rescue conducts a comprehensive strategic planning process. This process will be starting this month, and the plan is scheduled to be completed by September. Also, the board will receive an orientation presentation to provide new board members and existing board members an overview of the Eastside Fire and Rescue organization, governance, board member responsibilities, Eastside Fire and Rescue facilities, the funding model, and the service area. And finally, Eastside Fire and Rescue will give us an update on the traditional media report. So media contacts since the beginning of the year have been fairly extensive. There have been more than 30 contacts since in just the first month and a week of the year. So we'll get an update on that. And that concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Ray. Councilmember Mertz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. The Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board met on Thursday, February 3rd from 10 till noon. It was a hybrid meeting, but 99.9% of the people attended virtually, I would say. And from the agenda, there was really only one issue of one action item that we had, which was to review Black Diamond Comprehensive Plan. The recommendation had been for conditional approval. However, there was much discussion and a motion was made and passed to defer that for a month to allow further conversations. There were a number of community organizations and municipalities that had questions about how transportation was going to work out of Black Diamond, because the Washington Department of Transportation came and laid down some truth about what will or won't get built down there. So it was a lively meeting. And somebody's coughing. Then Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee will be meeting this Wednesday, the 9th from 7 to 9 p.m. And there are no substantive actions anticipated to come out of that meeting. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Mertz. Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. I have no report this evening.
It's pretty brief. Council President Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 2 reports. On Friday, I attended the February 4th King County Affordable Housing Committee orientation along with the new SCA members. And I'm looking forward to the first meeting of the year coming up on this Wednesday, the 9th. That meeting's agenda includes a briefing
Looks like we're having some connectivity issues, so we'll give it a second to see if we can get our council president back. And if not, I'll move into the mayor's report and come back to Council President Walsh. Cannot wait till we get back in person. Okay, I will not be able to see when she comes back because my screen will have my report on, but if someone can edit, oh, there we go. Council President Walsh.
Oh, good, I'm back.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. So just starting over from the top, because I'm not sure where it dropped off, but on Friday, I attended the King County Affordable Housing Committee orientation with the new SCA members. And we're going to attend the first meeting of the year this Wednesday on the 9th. The meeting's agenda includes a briefing on state projected housing needs and implementing HB 1220, along with approval of the 2022 work plan. And then on Friday, February the 11th, Deputy Council President Hall and I will attend a leadership meeting with the Issaquah School Board. That agenda is still building out, but I know at least it will include updates on school safety, COVID-19, and school construction. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President Walsh. Next on the agenda this evening is the mayor's report. There will be an executive session this evening to discuss potential property acquisition per RCW 42.30.110(1)(b). The item is expected to last 20 minutes and no action is anticipated in open session. I was pleased to hear from Senator Murray last week regarding the recent flooding of Issaquah Creek. Senator Murray expressed her concern and commitment to supporting our community through this event and protecting against future national disasters. So thank you, Senator Murray, for making contact. Board and commission recruitment. Issaquah is now accepting applications for all city boards and commissions. Our boards and commissions cover a broad range of topics: arts, economic development, environmental issues, growth, and even international diplomacy. We value a variety of perspectives and life experiences and encourage people of all backgrounds to apply. To learn more about boards and commissions and to apply, please go to issaquahwa.gov/apply. We're also in Hall of Fame nomination season. So nominations are now open for the Issaquah Hall of Fame Award. This is a top honor for making a lasting contribution to our community. Each year, the mayor and council president select a person to induct into the Issaquah Hall of Fame for their exemplary record of inspiration, leadership, and service. The award will be presented at the Chamber of Commerce's annual Issaquah Community Awards event on March 31st. And nominations can be submitted at issaquahwa.gov/nominate. The deadline for nominations is March 1st at 5 p.m. Going to give an update on the Capital Finance Community Task Force. The Capital Finance Community Task Force last met on January 26th to draft their recommendations for new revenue tools the city should pursue in order to better fund infrastructure projects. The task force will continue to develop its recommendations on priorities at the next meeting, which is tomorrow, February 8th, from 6 to 8 p.m. I am pleased to proclaim February 2022 as Black History Month in the city of Issaquah. Black History Month originated in 1926 when famed activist Carter G. Woodson influenced the American Historical Society to designate the second week of February as Negro History Week. This later became Black History Month in 1976. Issaquah honors the significant scientific, technological, economic, political, and cultural innovations of African Americans in the United States and in our community. The Equity Board has planned a lunch and learn event on Thursday, February 17th from 12 to 1 p.m. with a panel and facilitator to discuss the importance of Black History Month. More information can be found on the city's website. And there are a couple of upcoming community events. The Snoqualmie Tribe's Time Immemorial. The King County Library System is hosting a virtual program highlighting the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe's ties to the region tomorrow, February 8th at 6:30 p.m. This is a free live Zoom event featuring McKenna Sweet-Dorman, tribal member and assistant director of governmental affairs and special projects. To register, please visit the city's website. There will also be an open house on Title 18's natural environment component. The city is hosting a virtual open house to answer the public's questions on the first 2 natural environment discussion drafts. The virtual house will be on February 9th at 4 p.m. and is free to attend. To register and receive a meeting link, please visit our city's website. And you've heard a little bit already about wildfire this evening. I have an item on managing wildfire risk around your Western Washington home. On February 17th, 2022, join Matthew Axe, the Wildlife and Forest Resiliency Coordinator with King Conservation District, for a free webinar on how to protect your home and community from wildfire events. The event will begin at 6:30 p.m. and registration is required in order to receive a Zoom link. More information can be found on the city's website. And lastly, due to the increase in cases from new variants, City Hall in-person services have been temporarily suspended. In-person services are anticipated to reopen on March 1st with a Tuesday-Thursday 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. schedule. And that concludes the mayor's report. The next item this evening is our consent calendar, which was distributed to all council in advance. And if it's authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
Yes.
Thank you. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Okay, is there a motion? Council President Walsh?
Thank you. I would like to move the consent calendar as written in the agenda.
Deputy Council President Hall?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'll pass it over to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Starting with Councilmember Joe,
Aye.
Councilmember Martz,
Aye.
Councilmember Ray,
Aye.
Council President Walsh,
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele,
Aye.
Deputy Council President Hall,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunt. Aye. That's 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you, City Clerk. That passes unanimously. We'll now move into the regular business portion of our meeting this evening, and we do just have a single item, AB 8328, Title 18 Land Use Code Process. And we will be looking for some council feedback in order to direct the administration going forward. The City Council last received an update on Title 18 process at the September 2021 study session, and tonight staff will provide an update on the project. No formal motion is proposed, but the council is requested to provide feedback on the update process and public outreach efforts. And at this time, I'd like to invite Community Planning and Development Director Minnie Dhaliwal to make a presentation. Minnie.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Andrea Snyder, the Deputy City Administrator. And before Minnie starts, I just wanted to give a few opening remarks, if I may. Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Really, I just wanted to preface some of Director Dhaliwal's presentation by acknowledging that this Title 18 update is a very big and sweeping update. And as large and as comprehensive as this update is, it's still not going to cover everything. It's still not going to be include everything that everyone would want at this stage. There are a number of things that we'll likely need to put off and discuss in future years in order to allow for the time that we should have to develop policy and engage our community on some important topics. And so while the scope is large, we're also acknowledging that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in future years. That's not really a part of this scope. So as we go through this process, you may see things that that people would have expected to be part of this scope that we might just handle in future years, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And also the process that Director Dhaliwal is about to review with you tonight and ask for your feedback on, I think this is as thoughtful as Director Dhaliwal has been and staff have been in forming this process, and as many public meetings as we have identified for this review process. Again, it's just not going to be perfect. Some will say that it's too fast. Some will say that the process is too slow, and that we needed the changes done years ago. And the schedule that you'll discuss tonight and provide feedback on is really the administration's best attempt at balancing the urgency to get the code updated and make it compliant with state law and reflective of best practices as much as we can, and balancing that with making sure we have meaningful touch points with the community for developing thoughtful policy and developing thoughtful code. And this is really our best attempt at balancing those things. So if council has feedback on that, or feedback on your specific touch points in reviewing the policy, we really look forward to hearing those things. And I also wanted to note that the administration at this point still aims for adoption at the end of the year. We believe that this is very urgent and we need a better code, and we've heard the demand from the community to have a better code. We've heard from staff the need to have a better code to be able to provide more clear guidance and permits, et cetera. But all that said, the reality is that if Planning Policy Commission needs more time, or if City Council needs more time to review any of these issues, then we want to do what's right. We want to be able to provide that time. And so if we have to look into Q1 2023 for adoption, then we'll do that. But like I said, we're still aiming for adoption at the end of this year. Just wanted to let you know that that's an option that we are certainly open to. We just believe that adopting this new code, fixing the code, is really an urgent and important matter. It really reminds me of what former Finance Director Beth Goldberg used to say all the time, which was first better, then awesome. And I think that's what we're really looking for the Title 18 code update as well. So all that said, we look forward to hearing your feedback tonight, and I would like to turn it over to Director Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Andrea. Good evening, Mayor Polly and members of the council and community members who might be listening today on this very important project for the city that you all have supported and given the funding to undertake this big effort. Your boards and commissions have been working hard. This is a heavy lift. Some topics are very technical, some things are more easy to tackle, but we just wanted to have this time with you all to share what all the different boards and commissions have been discussing, the different topics, and give you a status update, but also seek input from you to see if we're headed in the right direction. If we are missing some things, how best to incorporate some of your feedback for the process and the public outreach piece. So we're not discussing the substantive issues of the code, but I've included some of those links. But as we get into the presentation, I'll walk you through to give you a better status of where we are. And Tisha, I should be able to share now. Okay, let's see. Okay, great. So let me pull up the PowerPoint. Can you all see my screen okay?
It looks good, Minnie.
Thank you. So like Andrea said, the purpose tonight is to provide City Council with a status report on the update process and public outreach piece. And in addition, we're asking City Council if you have members, if you have any feedback on the process and the public outreach piece. As you all know, but if any members of the public are listening for the first time and don't know what the Title 18 Land Use Code is being updated for, I'm going to quickly go through the goals and outcomes that were identified by City Council. So the umbrella goals were really to realign the code with communities' aspirations, as they're provided in the adopted plans, and to allow for public engagement in the process, improve efficiency, equity, consistency, and predictability, address current laws and best practices, and make the codes easier to understand and better organized for use. So that's the filter we have taken throughout this update so far. And so a little bit of background in terms of the timing. So since May of 2021, we've had many joint meetings with Planning Policy Commission, Environmental Board, Park Board, Development Commission. We've also briefed the Economic Vitality Commission on the topic. And the feedback from all of these meetings is informing the drafting of the different chapters of Title 18. In addition, we've had some affinity group meetings on specific topics. So the last update we provided to City Council was in September of 2021. And since then, we've finished the first phase of the update, which was analyzing the gaps and getting some policy direction. And we have started preparing the drafts and have scheduled public hearings as are moving along. So as you all know, we divided this whole update into 6 larger groups, or 6 big buckets, as we're calling it as we go along. So the first one is the natural environment. So this included a list of critical area topics, geohazard topics, steep slopes, shoreline setbacks, outdoor lighting, and sustainability. And we've broken this long list into 2 different groups because these were pretty big groups and very technical topics. So the first, the critical area piece and the steep slopes is in one group, and then the shoreline and outdoor lighting is in the second group. So this topic we've discussed with the Planning and Policy Commission and the Environmental Board as a joint discussions. The second is landscape and open space. And so these include the tree retention, green necklace, and open spaces, and how to incorporate some of the great work that was done with the parks and open space planning at the strategic parks plan level, and then also some landscaping standards. Environmental Board expressed an interest in having a more in-depth discussion about the trees, so we scheduled a separate meeting with them to get their feedback on the trees, in addition to PPC and Park Board on this topic. So on. We have zoning and uses, and building and design, and zoning and development standards. So these have been jointly discussed with Planning and Policy Commission and Development Commission. And lastly are the procedures and administration. How do we process our applications? What are some of the thresholds that we use, and so on? And in there is this terrain management, which we've had some preliminary discussions. It isn't necessarily a process and procedures, but it deserved its own discussion because of the golden outcomes. Has a pretty strong emphasis on protecting forested hillsides component to it. So that's sort of how we've divided it up in all the different boards that are looking at these different sections. The process itself has been the first phase, which was looking at our existing code, looking at what the state law and best practices are, where are we missing the mark, how is it not in compliance with our adopted policy documents, and really identifying a direction for creating the draft code. So that first phase, we have finished for almost all the topics that were listed in the previous slide. Phase 2, which is when we release the draft code and schedule it for public hearing, has started. So we're going to start with the natural environment topic. And those public hearings are scheduled for February 24th and March 10th. And we attempt to release the draft at least a month prior to the hearing, so everyone has had a chance to look through it. We also have scheduled open houses prior to the public hearing to give an opportunity for any community member that have a question or just want to learn more about it so they can make an informed comment at the public hearing. And the third phase is really for PPC and those boards and commissions to discuss the feedback that they hear on the draft code and provide some deliberate and give some direction on changes that need to be made to the draft, to the discussion drafts. So but for each of those topics, what we're thinking will work will be for City Council to have a discussion on each of those groups, with the idea that you can identify any additional considerations that PPC should study prior to finalizing their recommendation. And as PPC concludes all of these 6 groups of topics, we will combine it into a combined draft and then hold a couple of public hearings on the combined draft, at which time the PPC will finalize their recommendation to City Council, and then we'll bring that package as a combined draft with a formal recommendation from PPC for City Council's review and discussion. Again, kind of the same thing, a different graphic, but 6 buckets. We have the first phase, which we've completed. The second phase, we are here, February, which is anticipated to go from February to July for each of the 6 topics. And then the combined draft hearings in August and September, early September. And as each of these topics is discussed, PPC will give direction to staff on what changes need to be made to the discussion draft or what additional information they may need from staff to make an informed decision. So that will happen as we move along and for each one of these 6 groups. So from March to September. But as we conclude those discussions with PPC on the topics, we plan to bring that forward for council's consideration starting in March till September, and then formal review and discussion will start in September and December for council. So that's sort of the overall process. Now I want to get into a little bit of picking one topic and walk you through about how we're going about it. So for instance, for the natural environment topic, we started the discussion with the Planning Policy Commission and Environmental Board to identify the gaps, do the educational piece to share with them what the laws are, what our current code is, where the missing pieces are, and what some options may be for the city to consider, and got some preliminary policy direction approach from them. Then we have drafted the code. We're going to have an open house, and then we'll have the public hearing by PPC, and then PPC will give us their feedback and a draft code, and we'll bring that forward to City Council at a study session. After council study session, we will combine all of that in a combined draft, and PPC will hold the hearing on the entire thing at the end in July and August and September. And at that time, we're going to close the feedback loop with PPC so that it's clear about all the feedback that we've received so far and how that's been incorporated into this final combined draft. And then City Council deliberation is going to start towards the end of 2022. Again, the purpose of the council study sessions as we go along is to help identify any additional considerations that PPC should study. The information that we're thinking may be helpful for council that we can include is, keeping it at a summary of the proposed changes and how they meet the intended goals and outcomes for this for this update. We'll include PPC's feedback, we'll include the public comments log, along with a response of how the feedback was incorporated. We will also bring the draft code. So, but we're seeking feedback of, is this what will work? Or if you want to see us bring something other than what we've identified here. And I also included in your memo some of some of the items that come up during these conversations with various boards and commissions, with the community members, can be incorporated into this Title 18 update, but some of them are either recommendations for city programs, not necessarily regulations, but those are good things that perhaps we didn't want to lose, but are maintaining them on a whiteboard. And there are other, some suggestions sometimes come along that are probably outside the scope of the Title 18 because they deserve a much deeper policy discussion. So we will share that comprehensive list with and bring that forward to City Council when we bring the formal recommendation in September. And then at that time, you all can decide where to incorporate it in the work plan for future years. Another thing I wanted to point out is House Bill 1220 has multiple components in it that was passed. Some of them have to be incorporated in the next periodic update for the comprehensive plans. There was one item in there that requires indoor emergency shelters to be allowed in all zones that allow hotels. Because that discussion involves a more robust outreach process, so we have added that to the 2023 work plan. I also included some information. I think I had received some questions in the past about development agreements and if Title 18 updates will apply to those areas. And I've identified the development agreements that are still in effect and how the Title 18 updates are not going to apply to those development agreements. So with that, again, the timing here, another graphic showing you will go from February to July, August, with the PPC hearings and deliberations on each group. We will simultaneously be having City Council discussions as PPC wraps up each group discussion, PPC hearing and deliberation in August, September on the combined draft, and City Council review and decision from September to December. So here are some dates we've identified for the next council study sessions if council thinks this is the approach we should take. So with that, I think we're seeking any input you might have on the process or the public outreach. In your packet was also a public outreach plan that we've included. So that includes all the detailed information about the different focus group meetings and groups we've identified on each topic, how we're doing the outreach for the open house. We are planning to send a postcard to every property owner and resident in the city, one to inform them about the land use code update so that anyone that is interested can get engaged and attend the open house or engage in any future topics they may be interested in. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm open to any feedback or input council might have for the process.
That's great. Thank you, Minnie. Keeping my eye on the chat for questions or comments. See if we can do a little round table of our 7 council members here. Let's start with Council President Walsh, followed by Council Member DiMichele.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Dollywell, would you mind actually bringing back up slide 10 in your deck? That was not in the packet that I looked through, so I would just wanted to make sure as I'm asking my questions. Yes. Nope. One more. Nope, the other direction. Yes, thank you. So my first kind of question was what's going to be presented to us, because I'm very curious about what the process is. And so it looks like summary of proposed changes, PPC's feedback, public comments log, and draft code. So let me ask this in a different direction then. What type and level of feedback is going to be expected at those meetings? Are we planning to get into the draft code and go over individual lines of code? Will there be policy questions posed to council, much like there was in the memos to PPC? Are there sets of outstanding questions or concerns from PPC that need to be addressed? What is our level of engagement planned to look like during those meetings? You're on mute.
You should be good now, Minnie.
It says on it. Can you? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it didn't have a line across it. I don't know what happened. So it's a great question. It's really up to council at what level you want to engage in. Of course, we can give you the draft code, but there's going to be a significant amount of technical code language. We want to make sure we give you, we highlight the topics or policy, feedback that would be useful for council to at your level for if there's a policy implication. So really, if you think we will have a draft code ready, so that will be there. We can keep it at a higher level, or we can go down into the details of the code. My recommendation would be we at least start with synthesis of what we heard from PPC, what we heard from the community members, and how we've incorporated that into the draft that we are bringing forward. And if there are additional considerations that PPC should study that are not incorporated, that you felt should be included, that's the level of feedback that I think I'm hoping to get that will inform. But if you want to dig deep and read the draft code, and we can have sessions on those as well. So
I can add to that as well, Director Dhaliwal. I mean, I really appreciate the ad hoc work that was done in order to talk really about the high level goals that the project has. And so I think, questioning whether or not the intent is getting to those goal areas that you had laid out would be great. This is a very unusual task for a council to do. Usually you are presented with 3 or 4 lines of code that is addressing a problem. And now you're going to have an entire code. So we'll have to work through this as best we can and be respectful of where the majority of the council wants to be, recognizing that some of you may want some staff time to really sit down and go one-on-one with a staff member. But I think we're kind of hoping for that high level. Is it meeting those original council goals that the ad hoc laid out? Council President, did you have more questions before I move to Councilmember DeMichelle?
I have 3 more questions. I don't know whether you want to take them all at once or I can come back after. Okay, fantastic. So my next question has to do with that goals and outcomes chart. So I noticed that the draft review meetings are all focused on kind of the individual topic bucket areas, as you say, but I'm wondering how we're going to address the 5 umbrella goals from that goals and outcomes chart. How is that planned?
let me see if I understood your question correctly. So the 5 umbrella goals are for the entire code, but you're saying that the draft code we should highlight in our release of the draft code of what we've done in order to meet those 5 umbrella goals? Perhaps a cover?
I wasn't making a suggestion how I'm more asking how the administration plans to present to council whether, the scope of have you addressed the overall goals and outcomes? What are examples of that? How we as a council should evaluate whether those goals and outcomes, is there any plan to do that within each of the individual meetings? Is there a sense that that's going to be something that we handle at the beginning of the first meeting to give an overview of how we should evaluate it, or only at the end? How is the administration engaging with that concept?
Yeah, so as you know, there's those 5 umbrella goals, and then there are 13 specific goals. So with each draft, we can highlight how, what we did in terms of the 13 specific goals. But for the umbrella goals, we can provide a narrative that kind of walks you through of what were some best practices that we've incorporated? How have we streamlined it? It used to be 500 pages and now it's 100 pages and it's broken into 5 groups. I mean, however we you think it would be useful, but definitely that's the filter we have, and that's a guiding document, which has been really helpful throughout this update, is having that golden outcomes to provide a direction for this update. So we've used it. We know the information that we've used it for. We can package it and present it to council. Absolutely.
Okay, two more. What happens to our schedule if PPC asks to hold on to a topic once they get into the draft code language? What's the plan?
Yeah, throughout this public process, whether it's a small update or a large overhaul like we're dealing with now, we're ready to adapt as needed. If there is a topic that anyone wants to have, doesn't feel comfortable that this is ready and they want to have additional meetings, absolutely, we will, set up additional time. What that means in terms of specific date, we'll just have to adapt the schedule as we go along. It's not hard and set in stone, but it may mean asking PPC to meet additional meetings. It may mean, adding 3 months at the end of the schedule. It could mean a variety of things, and we have adapted as we've started this process. I mean, when the initial feedback was a lot of information in one meeting, break it down. We need a second meeting. So we've always kind of received that feedback and adapted it accordingly. So we're prepared to do that. Not at the keeping in line. I mean, this is our goal to get this thing done that you've charged us to complete. We could spend 5 years doing this, as long as it's not that sort of an adaptation needed. We will continue to march along and readjust as needed.
Council President, I just want to remind the council as well, we're coming into a full-on comprehensive plan update. So our project of 3 years ago is now bumping into a significant workload that will come in 2023. So I think what Director Dollywell said about additional meetings is good. I think the idea of stretching into 2023 is difficult because it's a mandatory updated comprehensive plan. It'll be all decks on hand for Minnie's team. So if we need to start to overlap issues, we may need to start and talk about resources as well, because 2 heavy lifts, finishing them off in the same year is probably a little more than we could handle.
Great. Last question. Have you taken a look at how other cities have done code rewrites, and particularly what their engagement with council at that final stage of adoption looks like? And particularly, I'm thinking about Redmond, given they did a recent code rewrite and revamp. What did that look like?
Each city does it differently, and each council engages to some extent. We can certainly look at Redmond's example. We're unique in the sense it's a complete overhaul. There's a rewrite going on with Redmond, but if you look at the scope, it is not to the extent that we're doing it here. So, but we're happy to look at, if there are any lessons to be learned from other cities. Absolutely, we'll take a look.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember DiMichele, and anyone else wishing to ask questions or comments, make sure you put it in the chat.
I have a question and then possibly a comment afterwards, but I don't want to assume something. The schedule that you presented to us of public meetings and engagement and talking to affinity groups and so forth is really thorough and really good. But the part that I did not see, and the part that I was hoping to see, is who's going to do the equity review? Who's looking at who we're harming and who we're helping with our decisions? And so my question is, maybe you've built that in and I just didn't see it in the written plan. So let me ask you, where in the process are we going to have that equity lens review of the proposed changes?
There is no formal equity review, because I think what we're doing is, as we're going along with each thing, that's the filter we have, overall filter. So, consistency, streamlining, equity, and those kind of things. But there isn't one comprehensive equity review in a formal kind of a way planned for this approach, because that itself is a big piece of work. If you have thoughts and ideas of how best to do it, where we can certainly do a more formal equity review, but it comes up during conversations with the various boards and commissions. I mean, they bring up certain things like, does this make sense over here or not? Or how are we treating a small development versus a big development, or what's happening around along I-90, and are we worried about air quality around freeways, and are we, and things like that. So equitable development in that sense, but not in terms of having a formal equity review of all our regulations. Perhaps that is a secondary thing that we undertake after all these policy discussions occur, and say, where did we meet the mark on this equity lens? But we are putting that filter as we go about different regulations.
Okay. So I see that City Administrator Bobkowitz maybe has something to say. I do have a comment, but I will hold off until other people have had a chance to talk.
City Administrator.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. The council has previously talked about applying equity lenses to important policy issues, and certainly this is one of them. We are still in that process of working with the council on the equity lens process. We will be coming back to you, I would imagine, in the next 30, 60 days to continue that discussion. Our challenge as a staff, I think, will be to marry that process up with this process. So rather than say we are doing it in the ways that Director Dhaliwal has said, let me say it a slightly different way, is that as the council's policy processes change regarding equity, we will apply them to the code to the best of our ability. And so I think you'll see that happening as this comes to the conclusion. But as Director Dhaliwal did say, we are trying to, have a very broad lens to this as we're going forward, but the administration understands the council's desire to precisely apply an equity lens. And so as we work on the parameters of that over the next while, once that's in place, we will then start applying that to the process for Title 18.
Thank you, City Administrator. I'm going to move on to one more question, Barb, before I come back to you. Victoria has a question, and then we'll start with comments.
Thank you. I had a question and a comment, but I can hold my comment if we're doing things in that order. So my first question is regarding the HB 1220. So I understand that my understanding is that whether or not we make changes regarding the emergency shelters, they will have to be allowed, because that was a change in the state law where hotels were, as you mentioned. So what is the motivation for not clarifying that in the code? Because it will work that way, because we have to be compliant with the law, as far as I understand it.
Sure. We started down that path, but I think it became quite evident that it was a topic of very high interest for the community. It sometimes citing these facilities can become garners more community scrutiny and interest. And looking at some other cities, Redmond had a 2-hour meeting on this topic, and it was very robust discussion and so looking at what it would take to have those conversations with the community, and not having the issue be lost in the conversations on Title 18, which is a much broader conversation we're having. So, you're absolutely right. The state law requires us to allow these wherever hotels are allowed. So if something were to come in until our code specifically called these out, we would have to be compliant with the state law. But in order to respect community's desire to have a more thoughtful, robust conversation about the topic, we felt it deserved its own path and separate meetings and discussion that perhaps would be more suited after we finish Title 18 update.
And if I could add to that, Director Dhaliwal, too, is we expected this. We expected over the original year, now we're heading into year 3 of doing the code, that other things would come along. And what we're trying to do is manage the original intent of the code update and then move to working on these new items that came up. So most of our community does not know about HB 1220. And it's going to be a big conversation, and we should plan for it accordingly. And of course, we will then adjust the code after the community conversation to be in alignment. But we do owe it to our community to discuss it with them and not just to put it in the code in this round. It could be extremely distracting. And I expect that there are more House bills that will come out this year that may also impact things that we have in our code. And we're just going to take them one at a time after the code update and make sure that we're in compliance. But for the most part, our community hears what they hear about those kinds of laws when you have some sort of public notice process and when you have some sort of public hearing. And we kind of owe it to them to go through all of those things.
Okay, thank you. I had another question about well, no, I think I have comments after this, so I'll hold comments.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Councilmember Joe's question.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Director Dhaliwal, on page 6 of your presentation, where you broke out the different areas that will be covered: natural environment, landscape, and open space, etc. On the far end of the chart, procedures and administration, each of the other ones had PPC DC or PPC Park Board underneath them, but procedure and administration didn't have a board or commission under them. Who would be reviewing that area?
Good question. So most of it is Planning and Policy Commission. There was a topic that we identified, which we thought Development Commission was probably the right commission to have the conversation about what's the role of Development Commission, what is coming to Development Commission, do they feel they have a good criteria to evaluate these projects on, how do they feel about looking at a very technical details. So we had some of those conversations with Development Commission, but mostly it'll be Planning and Policy Commission looking at that piece.
Okay, thank you. The next question I had, and last question I had, was how will the appeal process be reviewed in the sense that some of the reviews only go to a hearing examiner, some go to the municipal court, and some go to Superior Court, depending on the seriousness or the level of review needed. Are we going to be reviewing that as part of this overall plan?
Absolutely, yeah. So currently our process has level 0 through level 6, different appeal bodies and different decision makers. What we got initial feedback from council was the closed record appeals that council then has to make a decision on, and a desire not to be in that position. So we'll be bringing forth all the changes related to process procedures, including appeals.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. I am not seeing additional questions, so I'm going to start moving back through comments, which may end up generating some more questions, but let's start with Councilmember DeMichelle, Councilmember Hunt, and then Council President Walsh.
Thank you. I think there are many ways that we can do equity. And certainly one of them is to ask the question, who does this help and who does this harm? But other ways that we could do it is to include people in the discussions. So, if you're sending out a postcard and inviting everybody to a public meeting, I'm hopeful that that postcard would have different languages on it so that it reaches different communities within Issaquah. I'd like us to vary in intentionally reach out to communities that may not always participate in our discussions or in our commission and board meetings, and see if we can engage them in the process and bring people to the table. I think one of the guiding guidelines that we talked about when we were going through our training sessions was nothing done to us without us. It worries me that that Policy Planning Commission is having equity discussions without the people who are being affected at the table. I think that we need to be sure that we're hearing all voices in this process. And that needs to be built into the process very, very intentionally. So outreach to some of our marginalized communities, outreach to people in our community where English is not their first language. That kind of involvement, I think, is really critical here, that we're hearing all voices. And then build into the process the questions, is this particular policy helping someone, harming someone? What's the impact in our community of the decisions we're making? So, and I do commend you for a very, very thorough plan. I loved all of the people, all of the groups that were on those affinity lists, and yes, those are all great people to include. I just want us to be really inclusive of people in our community who sometimes aren't heard and need to be heard on these major policy issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. So my first comment is on the stakeholders and affinity groups. I think that it would be great to just take another look at those and see maybe the volunteer missions also have ideas. One idea that I had to add to the building and built environment topic would be climate solutions, and partly I suggest them to add to the affinity groups because they were involved with the climate action plan, and the climate action plan is one of our most recently adopted plans, and one of the reasons we're doing this code overhaul is to make sure our code is reflecting all of our planning efforts that we've adopted over time. So I would like to try to make sure that we are incorporating our climate action plan into this process. And I think one way would be to make sure that those stakeholders are there in the affinity groups. I liked the comments on making sure I like the comments from Councilmember DiMichele about making sure we have equity considered in this process. And I think there may also be stakeholder groups that could be included in those affinity groups that would help us have more perspectives. One additional piece of information that I think would be useful, and I understand that it does not need to be tonight, but I do think it would be helpful for us to have maybe a paragraph on each of the development agreements about if we expect Title 18 to apply to them or not. I think this is useful to us as policymakers to understand the scope of these development agreements and whether or not different parts of Title 18 will be impacting different provisions, if they will be impacting these development agreements. So that would be very helpful. We do have some substantial and large and important development agreements going quite a ways out into the future. So to better understand that, a paragraph on each one and how it relates to Title 18 would be great. And then lastly, I am concerned about the timeline. It has planning policy with their final recommendations in September. And then we would begin our review in September and hopefully finish by December. That means there's also holidays. That means there's also budget. And then we will have comprehensive plan updates starting in 2023. So we don't want to go over. And also this is an urgent process, so we don't want to go over that timeline. I wonder if we could just set us up for success. I wonder if we could have more structure around how we plan on processing the information in these intermediate meetings. I think this is something for us to consider as a council, also when we get back together to discuss study sessions versus committees, or how we want to do that. But there's going to be a lot of information to process, and if each step slips a little bit, we would miss our timeline. And I think it's important that we get this done. So my suggestion, which I'm sure other council members have good ideas, my suggestion would be maybe we, as council members, if we are going to meet all together for all of these topics, if we develop lists ahead of time of what changes or what topics we would want, so we at least have sort of a systematic way to go through those, more like what we have with budget, and we thumbs up, thumbs down if people want to engage on those issues. I think some sort of process like that would be helpful, because there's going to be a lot of material, and I think it'll be like multiple budgets all together, coming together. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Council President Walsh.
Thank you. So I guess to start out first, I really want to appreciate the hard work that has gone into this process so far. The staff and the consultants and our boards and commissions have really done some deep analysis and kept us moving forward. And even though I have a lot of concerns about this process going forward, I want to start with that, because this is big. So I have 4 main areas of concern as we come into the next phase of the Title 18 development. The first, I just don't think that one council study session on each of the topic areas is going to be enough. As I'm looking at this schedule, PPC will meet at least 4 times on each of the topic areas. And I know from looking at their packets that these are really, really big lifts, really big concepts. And for us to get brought up to speed on the topic area, understand the gaps across a wide set of subtopics, get a review of PPC's guidance, hear from the public, and provide nuanced feedback ourselves, I can't see that happening in a single meeting for each of the topic areas. So that's my first area of concern. Similar to
Council President Walsh, may I ask you a question about that as well? Because I know you sat on PPC. A couple of you have sat on PPC. I think you may be right. My question to you was, in your work now in a council chair versus a PPC chair, do you watch the PPC meetings? If they were to have 4 meetings on a topic, is that something you do to prepare for the meeting, or do you rely more on summaries of the meeting and staff presentations? Just curious.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say summaries are super helpful. I think in some cases, I go back and watch a meeting if I've been told there's something specific, or maybe if there was one meeting coming before our meeting, I think it would be very difficult for us to be expected to go back and watch all of those meetings. Yeah. So on my second concern, so Council Member Hunt mentioned wanting more structure to the conversation. And so I quite agree with that. I am left with a lot of uncertainty about the type and level of feedback that we're going to be providing. I've looked at the draft code that's provided for this first set, and it scares me because I don't know how to read it. I don't know how to interpret it or understand what that is. And so I'm concerned that I'm not going to know what successful feedback would look like. And whether, when we're leaving this one set of meetings on a topic, whether that's going to be considered kind of sign off from council on that topic area, and how that compares to the later kind of 3-month overview review. And so I would say that our council responds best when we're given very specific policy questions or areas of feedback. And so I would strongly encourage you to really think through what those are and what the feedback is that you need from us, because otherwise I fear that we're being set up for failure and we're not going to give you what you need in order for us to get a successful code out of that. My third area of concern is kind of that overarching goals and outcomes. Particularly, I know I've said it before, I'm really concerned about readability and ease of understanding. I think it's one way that we avoid getting one-offs and things where staff has to disagree with developers on how a code is interpreted. And so it's really important for me that the code is readable and easy to understand. So I'd like to get a sense of how you're writing a code before we get into the content of the code. Like how are you approaching writing the code in a way that sets everybody involved up for success? And I'd like to be able to either have a separate meeting or a portion of a meeting that's on what the approach is to meeting those overarching goals and outcomes, and specifically the one on readability. I think getting buy-in on the code structure and organization is really important. And I think now is the time, since I know you're already writing the code. Actually, I think probably a month or two ago would have been better, but that's fine. And then my fourth area of concern, I'm so sorry, I'm going on and on, but I want to encourage the staff to review what the sustainability department did for the climate action plan. The community and commission feedback that was presented in those memos was phenomenal. And given the number of meetings on each of these topics and the depth of discussions, I, as a council member, am really going to need very clear, straightforward information about what the feedback was. And I feel like the stuff that was presented for the ICAP was just the best example of that. So I would just ask you to look at that and use that as a guideline. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Walsh. I am not seeing any other comments or questions at this time, but I'll leave it up for another second. Am I off? Oops. I saw a few hands. Oh, yes, there we go. I had to scroll it up. Deputy Council President Hall.
Thanks, Mayor Polly. Councilmember Hall here. No worries. I put comment in right as you said. There aren't any more comments. I feel like I do that quite frequently. A couple, well, first I'll just share general support for all the comments that have been shared so far. I haven't heard anything that I disagree with passionately. I did want to say a few things. I do think this process and this timeline does meet my needs as a council member and the community's needs for engagement on the process. You know, after phase 3, we get kind of that, I wouldn't call it a full touch, but maybe half a touch on each of the topic areas to bring up any other considerations that PPC should be considering. And I do like that it's kind of structured for us to stay high level there. I do have the same concern though that Council President Walsh has, and that is, you know, are we going to have an effective amount of touches as a council to ensure it is meeting our goals and outcomes and every other consideration that we need to consider. So one thing that I don't know if we should move final review to Q1 in 23. I think the mayor brings up a good point about comp plan, but I would like to see at least 2 to 3 study sessions on it when we're at final review before it even touches a city council meeting. I mean, we should have the ability to get into it deep if we want to, or high level if we want to, a couple times before we're expected to vote on anything or make any amendments or anything like that. Let's see, I had some other stuff. Oh no, that was there. The only other thing, I thought I had another comment, but it's written in here somewhere. The only other thing I wanted to mention was I have been watching the Planning Policy Commission meetings over the last few months. I've been catching up with them on YouTube. And a few things, number one, I know we're not all in the same place to be able to do that based on our own time constraints. If you are available, I would recommend doing it because wow, our PPC members are smart. Those people are bright and ask amazing questions. And Director Dollywall and Kristen Leeson, you guys structure it in such a way that I think is effective to get them, to get good feedback for them, which is why I feel a little bit more comfortable in my seat as a council member. So I just wanted to say good job on that. But you know, as a council, we'll have to make our own decisions about what information we need to be comfortable moving forward as well. We're not all going to be able to just say, oh, PPC and all these boards signed off on it, so we're good to go. We have our own responsibilities as council members as well, and as a part of this group. I think that's everything I had with the postcard. +1 to additional languages, however we can do that. I know we're limited by space. But I think that's also an opportunity for us to add something like, if you have general comments, feel free to email council or the mayor or something to that effect. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. I mean, that's an opportunity for us to have a meaningful dialogue on other issues with the community too. So if there's space for something like that, I would advocate for that. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Hall. Okay, I think now I'm not skipping anybody, just scrolling to the bottom to make sure. Minnie, thank you for the presentation. And Andrea, thank you for the introduction. I think you got some fabulous feedback tonight on this item. The next item of business this evening is good of the order. And I will look to the chat to see if anyone has anything for good of the order. And if not, I do have a few meeting updates to do. Okay, let's go to Deputy Council President Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Deputy Council President Hall. Just a quick thing from Councilmember Joe. I appreciated your report on Cascade Water Alliance, and I miss being the alternate member of that board dearly, but I know it's in very good hands with you. I appreciate you sharing about the selling of surplus water and where that goes.
Meeting over? Oops.
If you're talking to Carl, you're not on mute. I would appreciate updates on that whenever that comes out. So clearly you recognize that that was an important thing to highlight with us. I think if the water supply development fund comes up again, I think that's another important thing to highlight with us, but I'm hoping that won't come up for a long time. Thanks. Or however we use that money to expand whatever the future vision of Cascade is. That will, I think, require council discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Council President. Looks like Council Member Joe also has something.
Yes, Council Member Joe here. Deputy President Hall, thank you for those nice comments. Just wanted to add one other thing about the ride along on Thursday. When I was talking with the officers, they were highly complimentary of the work that our human services people did during the blizzard, the work that they do with getting to people with mental health issues, getting them services, getting them matched up with things. So I really like the way that the city has made sure the human services element is working in concert with the police element, and they're coordinating, they're communicating, and they're getting people the help that they need along the way when they need it. And so I just wanted to share that with the council. Thank you.
That is a great share. Thank you very much. Councilmember Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Chris Ray. Just wanted to circle back and see if there was any comments or feedback or direction or thoughts on the wildfire prevention program that Eastside Fire and Rescue is going to be considering on Thursday. Just if there's anybody who had any thoughts, or if you want to take it offline in a very small group, I'd be happy to follow up. No, I wouldn't. Never mind. I can't do that. Sorry. This is your chance.
And there is a vote, correct, on this Thursday on what you discussed?
Yeah, the board is going to take action on this. So
it looks like you have a couple of comments. Let's start with Council President Walsh and then go to Councilmember Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Walsh. you know, I don't know a lot about this. I know that Sammamish has had a lot going on within their city administration and within the emergency department. And so I guess I would say just based on that level of knowledge, I would have a difficult time thinking about adding that to their plate just in order to save a little bit of money. Also, I mean, we've got a lot of wildland area around us, and particularly in other areas within the Eastside Fire and Rescue area. And so I kind of feel like that should be within their department rather than within an individual city. But that's just my kind of surface level concept. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how you guys discuss it.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Well, thank you. I mentioned the wildfire prevention and wanting to make sure that we discuss that on the King Conservation District Advisory Committee, because I know that we are at this wildlands urban interface, and we do have a lot of neighborhoods that are directly next to wildlands, and with climate change and changing the risk has increased, and we've seen that even reflected on the wildfire risk maps that have been recently produced. So it continues to be a big area of concern. I think maybe it's something that it would be useful for council to have a little bit more information about what's being considered, because I didn't quite understand all of the nuance in Councilmember Walsh's or Council President Walsh's comments, for example. So maybe if it's something that you could provide or you could share to City Administrator Bobquitz, and we could get that information, that would be helpful. And I can also let council know through City Administrator Bobquitz what kind of discussion we have about wildfire preparation at our King Conservation District meeting, which is tomorrow.
Councilmember Ray, I was going to come back to you anyway and circle back to see if you had additional comments based on what you heard.
No, but thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Great feedback. We will get something to everyone to at least have a feel for what is being contemplated. I think that it's extremely important, since we do live in this urban wildland interface, and it's going to be a problem. So I think it'll be an interesting and spirited discussion with the Eastside Fire and Rescue Board, but I am confident that we will come up with something that makes sense, and we will get you more information so that if you have other thoughts, you can share them.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Also, for good of the order, we have a couple upcoming meetings. February 15th, there's a City Council study session, and the potential agenda items for that include the Human Services Strategic Plan, the City Council structure options, and public engagement. And on Tuesday, February 22nd, there is a regular council meeting. It is on a Tuesday. It's moved to that day to avoid President's Day. So that is a special date for us. And the potential agenda items include Human Services Strategic Plan, Recreation Scholarship Program, and Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Map Amendments. So the last item we have on our agenda this evening is the executive session. And as earlier announced, there will be an executive session held this evening to discuss property acquisition per RCW 42.30.110(1) and the item is expected to last 20 minutes with no action being anticipated following the open session. So as a reminder, executive sessions are closed to the public, and we will now recess into executive session at 8:39 p.m. And I'm asking the city clerk to move the city council into a separate session within the meeting. And anyone who is not part of the closed session will remain in the main meeting, and you're welcome to stay in the meeting until it is reconvened. I'm also going to let the city clerk know as she moves us that we'll probably take a 5-minute break just to allow people to stretch and use the restroom if they need to.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm moving us into the practice session now.